Deep in Kamchatka, where wild nature neighbors human settlements, a story unfolded, balancing on the edge of comedy and tragedy. A group of poachers living on the fringes of civilization became participants in an event that might have seemed like fiction if it hadn't been witnessed. This is a story about an unexpected encounter between man and wild beast, about the consequences of carelessness and how one night can change the life of an entire company of people, forcing them to rethink their relationship with the surrounding world. It all began when Sergei, a city dweller from Vladivostok, decided to visit his old friends in Kamchatka. These friends were people of a special kind, harsh inhabitants of the wild for whom the laws of the taiga meant more than the rules of the civilized world, and whose lifestyle often went against official regulations. Poaching was not just a means of obtaining food for them, but a way of life and the main source of income. Arriving at the place, Sergei was struck by the beauty of wild nature and the harshness of his friend's life. Their home was a small hut, lost in the forest thicket, far from civilization. Endless forests stretched around, and nearby flowed a river rich with fish. The main surprise for Sergei was Masha, a young bear that one of his friends, Mikhail, kept as a pet. Masha's appearance story was tragic. Several years ago, Mikhail killed a bear, but seeing the orphaned cub, he couldn't leave it to certain death. So the little bear became part of this unusual family. Masha grew up kind and obedient, but like any wild animal, she retained her instincts. She was especially attracted to the fish that the men caught in the river. Despite all the owner's efforts, Masha tried to get to the nets and feast on fresh catch at every opportunity. On the day of Sergei's arrival, the friends decided to throw a party. Vodka flowed freely, toasts were raised to the meeting, to nature, to successful hunting. The fun was in full swing when one of the company, Stepan, suddenly noticed some movement by the river. In his alcoholic haze, he thought they had forgotten to chain Masha, and she was again stealing fish from the nets. Without thinking for a second, Stepan, quite drunk, rushed to the river. The others, engrossed in conversation, didn't pay much attention. Who knows what their friend saw in his drunken state? Running up to the river, Stepan saw a large figure rummaging in the nets. Not doubting it was Masha, he snatched a large fish from the net and began beating the hapless thief with it. He shouted and cursed, explaining to Masha why she shouldn't steal fish. To Stepan's surprise, the bear didn't resist, but only tried to dodge the blows. Finally, the beast couldn't take it anymore and disappeared into the forest with a roar. Pleased with himself, Stepan returned to the company, proudly carrying the saved fish. However, instead of the expected praise, he saw frightened and bewildered looks from his friends. It turned out that Masha had been peacefully sleeping on her chain near the house all this time. The realization of what had happened hit Stepan like an ice shower. He had just beaten a wild bear with a fish and by some miracle remained alive. The company froze in silence, digesting what they'd heard. Then the tension broke into laughter, which, however, quickly turned to anxiety. Everyone understood that the wild bear, so unceremoniously disturbed, might return, and it was unlikely to be in a friendly mood. The night passed in tense expectation, but in the morning, the friends discovered that all the nets were torn and the fish had disappeared. It seemed the bear had decided to avenge its humiliation by destroying the poacher's source of income. This incident became a turning point for the whole company, especially for Stepan. He realized how dangerous life in the wild could be, and how important it is to respect its laws. Sergei, who initially came just to visit friends, was deeply impressed by this story. He understood that the life of his poacher friends wasn't as romantic as it might have seemed at first glance. It was a constant struggle for survival, where any mistake could cost a life. In the following days, Sergei noticed how his friends' behavior had changed. They became more cautious, drank less, and paid more attention to safety. Stepan even stopped approaching the river without a gun, constantly looking around. Masha seemed to sense the tension of the people. She became calmer and more obedient, as if understanding that people's attitude towards her wild relatives depended on her behavior. Before leaving, Sergei had a long talk with Mikhail, trying to convince his friend to leave poaching and start a legal business, for example, organize ecotourism. After all, the beauty of Kamchatka's nature could attract many tourists willing to pay for the opportunity to see wildlife in its pristine form. Leaving, Sergei promised to help his friends organize a legal business. He was determined to change their lives for the better while preserving their connection with nature. This story became a legend among the locals. It was told around campfires, joking about Stepan, but at the same time admiring his incredible luck. After all, it's not every day that a person gets away with just a fright after such an encounter with a wild bear. For Sergei, this trip became not just an adventure but a real lesson. He understood how important it is to maintain the balance between man and nature, and how easily this balance can be disturbed. And somewhere in the depths of Kamchatka's forests, a bear still roams, perhaps still puzzled why a strange man decided to beat him with a fish. And who knows, maybe this incident taught him to be more careful when meeting people. Thus, a story about a drunken escapade turned into a lesson about the relationship between man and wild nature, about responsibility and respect for the surrounding world. And perhaps, thanks to this incident, a new ecotourism destination will appear in the Kamchatka forests, allowing people to enjoy the beauty of nature without violating its laws.